So welcome everyone to the EMCCA Investment Committee. I'm Councillor Nagat Khan, the Portfolio Lead for Investment. As we have new members with us today at the committee, and we go around the room, your name and which local authority or organisation you're from.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Robert Reaney. I'm Deputy Leader of Derbyshire County Council.
Hello, Jodie Townsend. I'm the Interim Director of Law, Governance and Compliance and your Monitoring Officer.
Hi everyone, Tom Gossall, Head of Investment Strategy and Programmes at the East Midlands Combined Authority.
Hello, I'm Councillor Martin Rawson, representing Derby City Council.
Councillor Linda Woodings, representing Nottingham City Council.
Good morning, I'm John Lawson, Councillor John Lawson from Derbyshire County Council.
Leader of Rushcliffe Borough Council.
Chris Pook from the Economic Development Team at Nottingham City Council in place of Vicky Jenkins today.
Davis, Head of Economic Growth and Regeneration at Nottinghamshire County Council.
Stuart Matthews, Nottinghamshire County Council.
I am Councillor Sarah Bolton from Derby City Council.
Good morning, Councillor Chris Amos, Borough Council.
Morning, I'm Claire Ward, I'm the Mayor of the East Midlands.
I'm Richard Williams, Executive Director of Resources at the East Midlands Combined Authority.
David Dacey, also an Executive Director of Strategy and Growth.
Thank you and welcome everyone. And we'll be live streamed, so if you're speaking, you'll just recognition. Following consultation with the Vice Chair, we've decided to adjust the order of today's agenda for improved flow. So item 8, Midlands Manifold, will be taken after item 10, the investment pipe. All other agenda items will remain as in the current order. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, thank you very much. Apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Wilson. Council.
No, Councillor Wilson's in.
Oh.
We've got two
There's
councillors. We've got two councillor Rawsons on the committee now, so that's going to cause some confusion.
So who have we got? Who
We
did we
have
get apologies?
apologies from Councillor James Rawson.
James Rawson.
Okay.
Chair, there should be apologies from Councillor Sue Bonser from Derby City. I'm here as her substitute today.
Thank you.
There's also apologies from Councillor John Clark and Councillor Jamie.
Chair, can I just give my apologies that I need to leave at 12 to take another important call.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? Okay. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. As the minutes of the previous meeting were not circulated within the meeting page at the next investment committee meeting. Everyone okay with that? Sorry, there's a bit of an error there. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Chair, sorry, I should have declared an interest for myself on item 9. As Derbyshire County Council is in receipt of grant funding from SPF.
Yeah, well done, John.
No,
I think we all
I
have.
was going to say, that'll be the case
All right.
for all members. You will
I beg your pardon.
It's a good thing to do it though.
It's
It's
a good thing to do,
always good to check.
Better safe than
The thing to remember is you're here as members of the Investment Committee of the East Midlands Combined County Authority. You've obviously got your roles at your own constituent authority, but you're here from that regional strategic decision-making reference of this committee.
Okay. But if you're not sure, just ask. It's always
Absolutely.
best to check.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. Item 4, public participation. Members of the public are eligible to attend the meeting of the investment committee and may submit questions. No questions have been received for this meeting. Very good. Okay, item 5, overview of the role of the investment committee. So Jodie, who's the Director of Law, Governance and Compliance, to introduce the roles and responsibility and its place in the wider governance structure of the combined county authority. So over to you, Jodie.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see some slides up on the screen before you, and these are also available at the moment on the live stream. So the presentation serves to provide a brief induction to the role of this investment committee. This is provided alongside the membership handbook that all members should have received a link to. Please do let our governance team know if you've not received that link. And in addition, there will be a number of online drop-in induction sessions for members coming up in the next month or so, and those dates will be sent around to you. But as I said, any queries or questions, please let myself know or the governance team, and we can answer them. So I'll take you through a few slides, if I may. So the governance framework. So the governance framework brings together leadership from across the East Midlands region to steer strategic decision making, unlock investment and deliver tangible improvements for your communities. It includes a mixture of political leadership, local government insight and areas key sectors. The governance framework sets out how our decisions are made, by whom, what delegations we have, and it also details the governance forums that exist to drive and develop decision making on that strategic regional basis. It also frames what the governing and procedural arrangements are in place to support open and transparent decision making. Now we have two sets of functions at the East Midlands Combined County Authority that have been devolved to us. We have Combined County Authority functions, these are board, and we have mayoral functions, these are functions that sit specifically with the mayor, that the mayor can determine alone in their capacity as the mayor. Now, Part 3 of our Constitution has a very helpful table of powers and functions, where they sit, what the voting arrangements are, and any particular engagement or consultation requirements that must be undertaken in determining those powers and functions. Now, I'll progress decisions via a consensus-based approach. If a vote is required at board, then the majority of voting arrangements require a simple majority that must include. But there are some slight tweaks to that, which you can see in our table, particularly around the transport functions. Now, we've developed our consensus-based approach very much in mind. So we have a big approach to partnership. Our pre-committee or our pre-board functions, engagement and consultation, and I'll come on to those in a bit more detail when we get to the committee structure diagram, which is a slide or two in advance. So our board, you will often hear the Combined County Authority referred to as simply the board, and of course we have our mayor, the East Midlands Combined County Authority mayor, who has been directly elected. Now the board, as I said, is responsible for all Combined County Authority functions. Some of these are defined as reserved functions, and therefore the decision making must be determined by the board. And again, these are detailed in the Constitution in Part 3. Now, the board is a strategic body. It's supported by its committees, some of those decision-making committees, and they provide appropriate, proportionate and supporting governance arrangements to help in its decision-making. This, of course, being one of the committees of that board. The Combined County Authority can undertake its decision-making at the board, or it can seek to delegate it out where it is not a reserve function, and it can delegate it out to committees, such as these, the formal committees, or it can delegate it out to officers. The key thing to remember is that board is our central strategic body. So only the board can decide the strategic direction, approve all strategy and major policy, approve our frameworks, that set out, of course, how the Combined County Authority operates. And this includes the governance framework, which I'm referring to now, what committees exist and how they support the board, it's in reference. The membership of board is set out there in the circles. So the mayor is the chair of the Combined County Authority board, and in each of the constituent authorities, Derby City, Nottingham City, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire County, each have 2 representatives who are voting members of that board. That gives us a voting membership of 9, those 8 constituents plus the mayor. We also have representation for the district and boroughs across the East Midlands region. There are 15 district and boroughs, and they have 4 representatives on the board, 2 for Derbyshire obviously and 2 for Nottinghamshire. These are appointed by the designated bodies, which are joint committees within each of those county areas. In addition to those non-constituents, as we refer to them, we have associate members. Associate members are individuals that the board has agreed to appoint to its membership. These are individuals not necessarily to represent an area or a sector, but with recognised expertise in that area or sector, so they can give that expertise to the board, help them with their considerations. We have 4 associate members, 1 for business, 1 for the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, 1 for higher education and further education, and then the final one being for the trade union movement. Those associate members, as I said, must be approved by the board to be part of that membership. Moving on, this is our committee structure. You'll see the investment committee there represented in the white box. So the board sits at the top, and the board determines what formal committees it will have that sits underneath it. We have 4 of those: Skills and Employment, Transport and Digital Connectivity, this Investment Committee, and a new one, the Housing and Land Committee. Those committees are made up of elected members. That membership is agreed again, noted by our board, and they can make decisions in regards to implementing their terms of reference. To the left, you will see our regulatory committees. We have 2 of these. These are committees we must have by law. We have the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which of course looks to hold decision making to account. It's slightly different to Overview and Scrutiny within maybe your own local authorities in that it must maintain a strategic focus. It looks at key things, for example, like our budget setting process, how we're delivering on our strategic objectives, but also holding the Mayor to account in regards to delivering mayoral priorities. And then, of course, we have the Audit and Governance Committee, a very important committee again, a role in looking at our accounts, our standards regime, and things like our internal audit and external audit reporting, which of course is very, very important to our compliance regime in the organisation. To the right, you'll see our advisory boards. Now, advisory boards are slightly different to committees in that they don't have a requirement to have elected members within their membership. So our advisory boards are where we look to pull together particular experts from across a particular field that can really advise not just the board but all of the committees as well on their work programme and what they're doing from that advisory board perspective. We have 3, the Business Advisory Board, the Innovation Advisory Board, and a brand new one called the Green Growth Advisory Board. Just wanted a particular reference to the Business Advisory Board. This one is a requirement. We are required to have this under the English Devolution Accountability Framework arrangements, and there is a recruitment process for this. So we must have an open recruitment process, interviews and then appointments for those private sector members that make up that vast majority of the Business Advisory Board membership. Underneath all of that, we have our informal governance arrangements that is here to support members and the Mayor in their decision making. We have a technical officer group, a TOG, that sits underneath each of those formal committees, those 4 committees. We have informal pre-board arrangements that sit underneath our board, such as a Chief Executive Officer group meeting, and then we have wider informal regional arrangements such as things like the Devolution Leadership Group, which is made up of regional place directors. All of those are there to support decision making and support the work programmes of those committees. Moving on to the next slide, just a bit of a run through around the actual investment committee itself. So as I said, it's a formal committee of the Combined County Authority. That means that Local Government Act requirements apply to it, and it means it can take decisions if they have been delegated to it by the board. The membership, as I said, is made up the same as it is with our other committees, Mayor plus 8 constituents plus 4 non-constituents plus an embedded business board representative, which we have on all of our formal committees, and then any other non-voting membership that the committee determines will be beneficial to its considerations. Now, the committee must seek to act in a regional capacity to support the development of the investment vision for the Combined County Authority area. That means there's a requirement for it to become the specialist portfolio committee for investment within our governance framework. It provides the forum for facilitating strategic thematic conversations on investment between its membership and others. And it has a real key role in developing for board consideration strategy proposals, key policy proposals and potentially investment proposals for the board to then approve. It also has a role to seek to develop a collective understanding of the key investment needs of the region, and it may want to utilise it, as I said, its informal governance arrangements, our technical officer group, to do work on its behalf, research, etc., to help inform any work around developing that. And of course, it can undertake specific thematic portfolio functions that are set out specifically in its terms of reference, which you should have all been provided with a copy of. It is chaired by the Portfolio Lead for Investment, Khan, with the Deputy Vice Chair, Councillor Rini. Both of those positions approved by the board after being nominated by the Mayor. And as I said, it has a degree of operational decision making set out in its terms of reference. So referring to its terms of reference, it's important, I think, just to highlight some changes that have happened since the last meeting of this committee. So board on the 16th of June agreed some amendments and enhancements to its governance framework. These included some specific delegations, not just to this committee but to a number of other committees. One of those is a general one regarding membership. It is now up to this committee itself to determine and approve any additional non-elected member representation that it would like to have in support of fulfilling its functions. Key to this committee, the terms of reference now has an East Midlands Investment Zone list of functions. This is a new development, and there's a paper later on your agenda in regard to the East Midlands Investment Zone strategy. So this committee is now the key forum for facilitating strategic conversations in regards to the EMIS. It's this committee that now has the responsibility to develop that collective understandings of EMIS investment needs. Once the single assurance framework is in place, this committee will be the one that approves EMIS investment proposals between £2.5 million and £15 million, and also recommends to board how to an approval view for anything above £15 million. This committee has the authority now to determine the programmes and projects for inclusion on the EMIS pipeline, which is a significant delegation, and some other key delegations with regard to the EMIS are also set out there and detailed in the terms of reference. Move on to the next slide. Now, something you're going to get very used to hearing is the phrase SAF, or Single Assurance Framework. Now, the Combined Local County Authority has been developing a single assurance framework which will set out how can we use public money openly, responsibly, transparently, and look to achieve best value for money. The single element referring to how the framework will cover all funding pots in the future, so we will have set standards across the board regardless of funding pot, which is a development, of course, upon our current assurance framework, which only applies to several, I think it's 3 or 4 funding pots. Now, this committee has played a really central role to date in the development of the single assurance framework. It's this committee that set its design principles, that's previously considered and agreed its various life cycle stages, its approval delegations, and some additional tolerances to provide additional safeguards to our board. One thing I want to sort of just draw attention to in particular is something called the principle of approval, which this committee previously approved. The principle of approval guarantees that only boards, so the key strategic body of this organisation, determines what goes on the pipeline. So it won't be officers that determine what goes on the pipeline, it will be that key strategic political body. That gives us some very early political buy-in to what we're going to develop, and of course how we're going to spend money on the development of those key projects and programmes. Now, once the SAF is in place, as this committee gets a central role in approvals for all investment proposals because it covers all pots. It will consider everything over £2.5 million, regardless of funding pot, and it has the ability to approve business cases between £2.5 million and £15 million. For those things, as I said, over £15 million, that's a board responsibility. It will come to this committee first, and this committee will make a recommendation to the board on what it thinks in regards to that business case proposal. Moving on to your work programme. So all committees, and you'll be used to this from your own authorities, all committees have work programmes that detail what they intend to focus their time on and how they will utilise the governance arrangements in place. We have a calendar of meetings which sets out a series of dates for all our committees. Those dates are for when the membership can come together and undertake various business. I just want to highlight that those dates are not always necessarily formal committee meetings. It is for you as a committee to determine how best you want to use those dates. Now, the key things to bear in mind is, of course, if there's a decision that's required to be taken, we will need to have a formal meeting that's obviously accessible to the public where you can take that decision. But if we're looking for a steer, if we're looking for engagement or consultation with the membership, if it's a training or development item or a briefing item, you do have the option as a committee, if you wish, to determine to do that informally, which means you don't have to necessarily come together in person. You can do that via Teams or perhaps another way. That might make it a little bit easier given the size of our region in terms of coming together on a regular basis. Highlighted there some of the things that may of course pop up in your work programme, but a reminder again, it's your work programme. You as a committee determine what the content of that is, we would absolutely expect, given the key things coming up, that you keep a key interest on the EMIS, East Midlands Investment Zone, on the investment pipeline of the organisation, how we're actually applying the single assurance framework once that comes into place, and when we are delivering those standards, as well as those, of course, those approval delegations you have, and of course the overall investment approach of EMCCA moving forward. And then the final slide I just want to reflect on is that support that's given to the committee. As I mentioned, all committees, formal committees, have something called a technical officer group that provides help and support. The investment committee is slightly different. You actually have a bit more of a higher profile technical officer group. It's something called the investment panel, and they do have some core roles in, that they undertake to support the work that you do. Now they look to drive the level of expertise around Treasury's 5-case model in regards to the development of business cases and approval considerations. Now what that in effect means is they will undertake technical assessments of business cases above 2.5 million, and so when you get a paper saying here's a business case, here's a recommendation, they will then give you some advice from their technical assessment. These are key things we think you should focus on, these are red flags, or this is a thumbs up, this is what we think in regards to that business case proposal. They should also be seeking to strengthen delivery of the single assurance framework principles and the project life cycle once it's in place. This means making sure they're working with our constituent officers and internal officers within EMCCA to get a full understanding of single assurance framework, the standards, the proportionality, and make sure it's being appropriately applied. If there's a concern that that isn't the case, they'll make this committee aware of it. And also to better support elected members in fulfilling the roles, of course, set out in that terms of reference for this committee. As I said, there's a two-way potential relationship there. You can give that investment panel things to do, research to undertake. You could even ask them in the future to look into maybe undertaking a review into a particular decision that's been taken if you've got concerns, etc. So they are there to support this committee heavily moving forward. So that's a quick overview of the role of the committee. As I said, the handbook should give you a bit more detail as well, and there'll be more information upon our website, and we've got those member drop-in sessions coming up. But happy to take any questions if you have them now, or please do contact me outside the meeting, and happy to have a conversation with you about the committee and the wider governance framework. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jodie. That's really a flavour of an understanding of why we have each one of these, and it covers a lot of the things on the agenda, of course, and it'd be good to get into the detail. But does anybody have any questions? Things?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I mean, if you have an idea of the time that it would take to develop, you know, from the initial call out for ideas through to actually board approval. And I think in my diary, the investment board is down for quarterly meetings at the moment. I'm presuming there's the capacity to increase that by this committee if it turns out that time is of the essence and monies have to be approved and spent. Is that flexibility within that, is there?
Yeah.
There's absolutely flexibility in the calendar meetings for you, Chair, so that's why we've given you more than quarterly meeting options, and then if you need them, you can call upon those. And of course there's always a flexibility to call additional meetings if and when required. You'll of course appreciate we're working in a place there with the timetable and all the timetables of the constituent authorities and our non-cons to make sure we really limit any clashes, but absolutely flexible. One of the things, for example, in the single assurance framework is that we really try to drive proportionality. So there's no expectation, for example, that the level of due diligence approval of around £25,000–30,000 would be exactly the same as a 15 million, £20 million project. So that's again a really speeding up that decision-making process. In regards to sort of anticipated timeframes, that again very much comes down to the complexity, whatever the. But having that, they said, a minimum at least quarterly set of meetings, it gives you an opportunity to have that consistent view of pipeline content, pipeline development, in business case development and when approvals are coming forward. And of course we do have our forward plan, which sets out when decisions are coming forward to our board, which again should give you a bit more insight again to when things are coming up.
I was just thinking about the complexity of diaries. I don't know whether it would be worth scheduling like almost dates in, but then cancelling them if they're not needed, only because of can stretch out. And so if you did need an urgent meeting, you'd have a reserved date. I don't know whether that would be something that might be future.
Sensible
just for practicalities,
And just to say that, Chair, the governance team have already done that in regard to the full cycle. So I think there's 7 dates potentially in all of this committee, so that you've got a bit of scope initially just in case that particular circumstance arises.
Okay, Councillor Matthews, and then.
Yeah, as the investment committee grows and we get more and more companies or people who want to or our financial input, do we come direct to the committee or to give the information from these companies or?
Okay.
So I think in regards to the key role of the committee is then it's about managing that investment pipeline, what proposals and then how you approve them. Now that interaction with companies and external partner stakeholders, that's all done in that informal background space led by key officers, particularly the strategy and growth. So that work has already been undertaken. That said, there'll be officers from your authorities as well that are part of that work. Really close working, and they've got a responsibility as well to come back to you in your own authorities, let you know what's happening at EMCCA, what's happening with that pipeline, and also perspective on what you're looking to get from that, from your constituent perspective. But yeah, any queries around that, so come to officers, we can advise you on conversations.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Really, just to support what Councillor Wooding said, really, and sort of emphasise the point of almost, apologies, almost repeating the question, but it's taken a long time to set this organisation. It's incredibly bureaucratic, and what worries me, and I think we've probably all got the same worry, is that if somebody really has a project that's urgent and needs an answer, we need to be, I was going to say lean and mean, but we don't want to be mean. And it could be that the mayor gets asked, well, can you support this project? Oh, well, it's got to go through this process, it's got to go through that process, and etc. Everybody's drawn their pensions before anything actually happens. So I suppose I'm just trying to re-emphasise the point that we have got to show that we have got to make efficient and fast decisions and not just get bogged down with bureaucracy, because I fear that's the way it will end.
Before you come in, Jodie, I think what we've got to make sure though is there's a framework in place that we've got to get the assurance, because somebody might have a brilliant idea, but if it's not, you've got to test the risk, because you can think. So we've just got to make sure that that's why we have frameworks, that people understand what the processes are. I'm not saying get caught up in that, but you've got to be very clear, because if you give money, it's public money, it's accountable. You've got to make sure that the return is real, because a lot of people have been shafted by stuff that sounds brilliant, but there's no substance behind it. But Jodie?
Yeah, and to give some. So the single assurance framework has been specifically developed to be efficient and act at pace. So there are multiple routes through it, so you can really motor through that place. It's not designed to be a bureaucracy. It should make everything far simpler. Now, one of the key roles of this committee is to hold this organisation to account. That single assurance framework. So if that does not become the reality, you should be holding officers to account, asking them why, and we've got various in the single assurance framework to continually review those processes to make sure they're operating as effectively as they should be. In addition to that, decision-making provision, and of course we have mayoral decision-making and delegated decision-making provision that is also can be applied to projects and programmes that come through, which gives us other routes again for making. So completely accept the view set out by the member. It's one of the reasons we wanted the single assurance framework. We feel the existing one is far too slow and far too bureaucratic, but please do hold us to account on that as that is rolled out and delivered over the course of the next 12.
And that moves us nicely to the next agenda item, which is a single assurance framework. This has come to this committee about 3 times so far, I think. So the idea is this is the final draft, and it's for comments from any committee members to feed into it before it goes to board for final approval. So this is you again, Jodie.
I'll be swift so you don't have to listen to me too much further. But as I mentioned, the Single Assurance Framework, its purpose is to set out how EMCCA will use public money transparently and seek to achieve best value for money. And that single element referring again to how the framework will cover all funding pots in the future, not just a handful. Absolutely vital framework within combined authority settings, as it sets out that approach for how do you turn an idea into a concept, get that on the pipeline, and get it approved and then delivered as a programme and as a project. Now the report sets out why the Single Assurance Framework, or the SAF, and how, including the key role that this committee has played to date in its development over the past 12 months. 3.10 and 3.11 of the direct impacts that the SAF will have on the role of this committee, which again refers to those elements I mentioned previously, particularly in regard to the approval before this committee. Also, though, just to highlight, it's about driving standards, so standards of development in those business cases makes it much more likely they will then deliver those intended benefits and value for money. And this committee has an oversight role in making sure we are doing that. 3.13 and 3.14 refers to the clearance process for a Single Assurance Framework. Now, we must get clearance from central government that we can adopt implement the Single Assurance Framework. This requires clearance from Department for Education, Department for Transport and the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Learning. We submit this to government back at the end of March in 2025. We were anticipating we would have it cleared by now. Unfortunately, there are delays within the department centrally that undertake this review, where they are currently focused on those authorities that are listed. So we're not now expecting government clearance of the document until mid-August. However, the intention is still to take the Single Assurance Framework to 21st of July board, where we will be asking boards to approve adoption of the Single Assurance Framework subject to that government clearance. Material change to the content as a result of that government clearance, then we will simply bring it back to board in the September meeting. So nothing will be agreed or about that board approval. So the committee is asked to note Appendix A, the draft Single Assurance Framework document. We're going to take forward a report to the board, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any comments, questions?
I'd just like to, oh sorry.
No, go on, Councillor Reedy.
I'd just like to pass one comment why we need this and support it fully. I would just like to, in the sense of speeding up the process for people to get money from us, I think some effort put into it being made user friendly ultimately. So while we agree the framework, it must be easy to access, quick and efficient. Pick any commentary up on that, although I appreciate this is quite a technical document to get government approval, but I would like to see it be user friendly.
Okay.
And Chair, just I agree with the Vice Chair. If it's not user friendly, then it's not going to serve one of its core purposes within the design principles. There will be guidance, there will be web pages, etc. that all go along the assurance framework. The intention will be to go out and engage our constituent authority officers to take them through the Single Assurance Framework, and so they fully understand that process, and for them to also be included in that training, development, implementation plan that will of course be the next stage that comes after adoption.
Rawson?
Thank you. Yeah, just for absolute clarity, could you just confirm the points at which this committee is in the process, and whether that's the same for all applications or whether it's different for different types of applications?
The key thing to remember is emphasise the single, so it's to cover all elements that go onto the pipeline. Key role for this committee in particular is in regards to approval. So as I said, anything over £2.5 million that requires £2.5 million, it will come to this committee. This committee has the approval power for anything between £2.5 million and £15 million. So it will consider the assessment of that business case, any advice, guidance, of course, in the report, and it's this body that will make that decision. Will come to this committee. and this committee will do all of those things, but rather than approve it, it will make a recommendation to the board, the Combined County Authority Board, on whether it should or shouldn't approve. I was going to say that's a very standardised approach in regards to authorities across the country. They all have slightly different levels of delegation. I think it's fair to say that ours is probably a little bit lower than some of those other big combined authorities at this moment in time, but we are only a year old. It's appropriate to go towards that lower level in regards to approvals initially.
So just to be clear, it'll be the board that decides whether a project goes into the pipeline committee once the business case has been developed, and then it will be this committee that will, depending on the value of the application, will say yes or no.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark?
Demon and to that as well. So, just to be clear, if this £7 million project, whatever, so if this committee approves it, is that it? Is it immediately enacted? Because does approval mean approval, or does it mean idea and it's got to go back into a bureaucratic process?
No, approval is approval. Approval means you then go into delivery. Now, obviously, when
straight away
over the business case, I imagine there will be detail within that case about when delivery would be proposed to start and the time phasing for that. But it is a decision to then allow and enable delivery to then take place. The pipeline, deciding what goes on the pipeline, that's a board decision. That stage. And the reason that exists is so that we've got political backing very early on in the process for what's on the pipeline, so there is no requirement to come back to committee for further approvals. It's just board puts it on the pipeline, yes, no, and then this committee and or the board approves the business, slowing down that process.
Okay, so just for my clarity then, so because the single assurance framework just tells you about the involved in this, there's the concept, the development, and the approvals and how it works. But is the approval, so if board decide to put it on, because we've got 15 million, we can approve it. If it's over 15 million, we recommend to board, for example, to approve it, but they have to finally stamp it.
That's correct, yeah.
Fine. Okay. Anybody else got a comment? Yeah.
I think 3.1 just sets out exactly what this is all about, and we do have to make sure that we are spending public money responsibly and openly, transparently. Yeah. I'm afraid in the past on some of the D2 and get to where they should have been when they were approving everything. So I say to me that's the key thing that I see in this report today.
Thank you, that's all for noted. Everybody agrees to note that much. Okay, if we move on then to item 7, the East Midlands Investment Zone Strategy Investment Plan and Programme Update. Tom, you're going to take us through this report which seeks Midlands Investment Zone Strategy Investment Plan and key recommendations from the document, seeks approval of 450,000 towards the delivery of development and exploration works for the EMIS tax and business rate retention. Over to you.
Yes, so I'll try and set it out a bit simpler than that, and I've got to drive the slides from here, hence why I'm on the table, but I'll feed through and go from there. I'll give you a brief overview in terms of the EMIS programme in general. Members and the members that have previously been on the committee, to give you a bit of context about what the programme is all about, what we're looking to achieve off the back of it, and how some of in terms of what we're looking to deliver. So fundamentally, this programme is about one key thing, and that's driving growth in the advanced manufacturing and green industries sector across the entirety of Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. So the investment zone encompasses the entirety of the counties, not just the tax and business rate retention areas, just to add to that piece of context. We have £160 million worth of total funding package over a 10-year period, which started last financial year and on for 10 years from there on. Within that, we can offer tax and business rate retention incentives to 3 key sites across the area, and those key sites are the Explore Park site indicated by the red dot, which is our bordering of Bassetlaw and Bolsover, where Lango Rock currently house their construction excellent manufacturing centre, in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, crossing over. There is the Hartington Staveley site, which is in Chesterfield Borough, and that is looking to redevelop that site and bring it forward for public usage. Some phases of the development ready to go, some will be later on in time. And then the third site in the tax and business rate retention area is the Infinity Park Derby site, just south of Derby City Centre, bordering South Derbyshire down there. These three sites have been brought forward with tax and business rate retention incentives. Explore Park only has tax incentives, but the other two have business rate retention. The kinds of tax incentives that you can receive on these sites are things like the employer national insurance contribution assistance, therefore you would get a discounted rate of national insurance should you choose to locate your business on that site. It's things like stamp duty, tax land relief, and then other incentives that come in around enhanced capital allowances, so you get tax deductions off of capital equipment purchases if you are in the relevant sectors and you buy equipment up front when you locate on those sites. The business rate retention mechanism is, what that means in this instance is that any new business rates that are generated on these sites, the Hartington, Staveley and Infinity Park sites, will be retained by the Combined Authority for reinvestment back into that sectoral development over the next 25 years. So it can create quite substantial amounts of funding for us to be able to reinvest back into the economy and look to build and drive sector-based programmes of work, and look to also potentially invest up front and borrow against future business rates for us to generate early activity of development on those sites moving forward. We're looking at things like nuclear development in and around the Infinity Park piece, advanced manufacturing around green construction, and advanced off-site manufacturing construction at the Explore Park. And then Hartington Staveley is looking at a development around rail clustering, but also other advanced manufacturing uses off the back of it. In terms of the vision and objectives that we're looking to present for the EMIS programme, I think there's four sort of strategic objectives that are outlined there. So it's enabling inclusive growth in those priority sectors, making sure that we can take forward the green industries and advanced manufacturing sectors over the 25-year period and on into the future and build that development. There's a piece around driving innovation and research, which our sole intention with driving innovation and research in this programme is to make it tangible and turn it away from just being done for the sake of researching new ideas and actually making it commercial, bringing those products to the market and tangibly creating new markets for us to invest in. There's a piece around strengthening workforce capabilities, then we can aid inclusive growth across the area. So that's bringing people back into work, it's upskilling people in current industry, and it's making sure that we can translate people who may have skills that may not be future-proofed, bringing them into these industries and providing the workforce for the future to grow these two sectors. And then I think the last strategic objective for us is about the designated opportunity sites and making them prime locations for investment across our area, so then businesses can cluster in and around them, developing, like I say, nuclear clusters in Derby, building on the strength there, looking at the advanced manufacturing and off-site construction strength that we have up at the Explore Park site, and really building off the back of that. In terms of work and activity that we've done so far, we've looked at two main things and two main areas of spend. So this is included in the paper, so I won't go into the full details around this, but there was an innovation roadmap programme which is looking at how we look to invest in the future and giving us a plan and a guide as to what we should invest in the future in innovation. What it wants us to do is to looking at what future innovation areas are coming forward in sectors, how the nuclear sector, for instance, is going to develop into the fusion and fission uses that we've got in the defence uses. As one example, it's about how we create more collaborative innovation and research areas for us to develop sort of really forward-looking, strong technologies and processes to move our industries on and not let them lag behind and be ready and future-proofed for us to develop future projects. We've also done the same looking at sort of skills needs and how we develop the career pathways for people to be able to access employment in these key areas, and what the future skills needs are going to be of these areas and employers, and engaging with industry bodies to really understand. We've got a group of people who are skilled in this piece now. Actually, in 20 years' time, what are the needs of that sector, and how are we going to look to develop that? And how do we actually encourage people to be looking at advanced manufacturing and these sort of green industries cluster as a job for the future, and moving them forward into those places, giving them the right steps to work to deliver that. So overall, one of our next approaches has been to develop the strategy and investment plan, which we are looking to seek an endorsement for approval at this meeting here, and then to pass on to the board. The approach to the strategy and investment plan started with baselining, so where do our current sector needs sit at this point in time, and use those innovation and skills roadmaps to give us some of the information there, and where are these industries trending, where are they going to move to in the future, and how can we be responsive to that. We've directly engaged with multiple different businesses, sector engagement organisations who look after those businesses, things like the Federation of Small Businesses, Make UK, who are the trade body for advanced manufacturing across the country, academia from a further education and higher education perspective, and then of course through our constituent partners and the local authorities in the area to work with them about how we engage and how we deliver on this. It's led to a set of objectives for us to try and hit, and recommendations. And then we can sort of plan about how we're going to utilise the funding that we've got to take that forward for development. So in terms of the strategic framework that it's led to 4 themes of development and growth that we should be looking to target. So enabling inclusive growth and removing barriers. And all of these have investment areas that we could look to target to deliver on that growth. So like there's the EMCCA Beacon piece, which is looking at developing a brand around this and selling ourselves as the area for advanced manufacturing and green industries growth across the area. An EMCCA Business Hub, which is looking at delivering business support, which is specialised around those key sectors, but not duplicating activity that's taking place already at the moment, giving people really in-depth support to grow their businesses in those areas. Alongside that, potentially a business fund to look to invest in those businesses, and then sector network development, so building the cluster around the advanced manufacturing and green industries. I won't go into the key detail, but I can pick up if anyone's got any questions around the investment areas here. But the theme 2 is looking at maximising skills and pathways to work, so how we look to develop those pieces out. Driving competitive advantage through innovation is the 3rd area for us, and then anchoring the investment and opportunities. So that's specifically looking more towards how do we develop the key tax and business rate retention sites across the area, and how do we make the most out of them for future growth moving forward. Sorry to whistle start talk, but I'm just trying to keep us moving. With regards to the 8 strategic recommendations, so they are really, to summarise them, an early years focus on planning how we develop the sectors across the area, so working to deliver that. And what I would say, these provide the background and the framework for us to build the investment pipeline for EMCCA off the back of this, but we need to agree these whether the idea and the strategy moving forward is the right way to go about this. So that will look at promoting planning and implementation, how we actually look to deliver on those sectoral activities, and how we grow our sectors across the area. The second one is about championing EMCCA as a nationally significant hub. How do we utilise the businesses that we have in the area to develop our sectoral strengths, and how do we say that the East Midlands in particular is the place to be and the place to come and invest in terms of advanced manufacturing and green industries. Linked to that is the coordination of the EMCCA brand and how we sell that out to international investment markets, and how we look to attract investment off our sectoral strengths in the area. That may be now slightly different with the notions that came out of the industrial strategy paper about industrial strategy zones, but we'll need to sort of work with other bodies to make sure we can deliver on that. We want to look at aligning business support for tailored programmes for delivery, and as we said earlier, it's about specific business advice to advanced manufacturing and green industries businesses. That means we can get really into the detail and help them to progress on their sector challenges and the pieces that are holding them back, because a lot of the support at the moment is generic business support, which can be tailored to any company. We really need to get into the detail about how we look to help those businesses to move on with their specific challenges. There's then, in a similar way in supporting businesses, actually, how do we support the planning and development of skills activities? So how are we planning curriculum moving forward? How are we investing in our capital infrastructure to deliver the right skills to the right people, and what sort of capital equipment are we putting in FE and HE providers? How are we making sure that they're engaging with the market to understand the needs of employees and delivering the right skills activities? Then young and retrained people are coming out of these courses with the skills they need to go straight into jobs and deliver on that. There's the enabling of collaborative innovation, so how do we get business working with universities and other areas to deliver innovation projects, then we're getting tangible outcomes off the back of innovation. So it's not just sitting with an academic somewhere and being researched over and over again. How do we make sure that that research is working its way into a proper business? They can commercialise that research and they can take it forward for development. The seventh one is about supporting early development of the key sites. So if we can look to invest and promote those sites for development, actually we can drive business rate retention growth, which allows us to reinvest those rates back into the development of the EMCCA programme over the 25 years. The earlier we do that, the more rates we will retain as a combined authority, and then therefore we can reinvest them and borrow against them earlier if we decide that's the way we want to go. And then that segues into the last piece around looking at long-term investment planning against business rate retention ideas, and exploring the ideas that we can in terms of how we leverage other finance into our investment zones, to make sure that it's not just that £160 million pot we were talking about. We can bring in other funding to really drive sectoral growth in advanced manufacturing and green industries.
Perfect, thank you, Tom. Any questions?
I've got a few comments. If you don't mind, I studied the paper with some interest, because two of the zones that's been identified I actually don't live far from the area. Obviously, the concept of these zones where we promote activities, an old concept. I didn't see any kind of measurement against why some work better. I didn't see any of that work, and there are reasons why some zones take off and others don't. There's also quite a use of bidding that could be interpreted like innovation and tech companies. I saw no reference to actual inventors or the problems they face. What does innovation actually really mean? We're at a stage in this country where neither at the market will be sliding down the patents charts for the last 3 decades. So there seems to be little understanding of what precisely innovation is, or what the problems inventors face, or why we'd be sliding down the patents charts. If this area is to be a kind of, as it were, then understanding those problems might help. On a simple basis, just having a patents office or a branch of the patents around that might be sort of useful. The other element I thought was that the tax benefits, which is going to hook the business, it talks about quite significant figures going forward. I felt the explanation around them was weak, as it were. I mean, I've got a tax background or a financial service. It was like one paragraph. I mean, the key selling point of businesses here is going to be a sort of a tax hook and a sort of this is going to be green products or innovation, but I felt that kind of advice or information around the tax hub was not enough. There's also no description about how this will sort of advertise in it, or legislation. We've got, obviously, this is something the government want, and we've got numerous MPs, small tweaks to legislation, this, no reference to any of that. So, just commentary really. You know, I'm very pro those little business centres, but I think we could understand them more, and I think we could do sort of greater research into how some are successful and others aren't, and what we could do in this area to make the East Midlands really sharp. A few simple changes in effect could really help this lift off.
So Tom, just before you answer, it would be good to understand what kind of interest and uptake there is in this as well at the moment.
Little at the moment because the policy is so early in terms of its inception, having come online 2024. So part of the, and I think it leans back into the comments you were making, Councillor Reilly, about moving into the next phases of explaining those benefits and actually producing a more public-facing document which will go out to people and businesses to let them what the tax sites are and the reasons as to why they should move as part of it. And I think one of the key activities that was through the sort of the EMCCA beacon, which may be renamed, but looking at developing the brand, part of developing that brand and selling out to international markets and to investors in the UK will be explaining those tax benefits to people and bringing them on board through that. And one of the things we're doing at this very moment is calculating the kinds of financial benefits that a small business could receive if they did locate on one of those tax sites, and setting that out in plain English and numbers to them by modelling examples of how they move onto the site. So those kind of things will be published. I think they would probably be in a separate kind of document and and to a different audience potentially than the strategy and investment plan would be. I think that's more for our reference as an area in terms of how we look to develop the programme.
These three areas, oh sorry, are these three areas actually being selected, or are they just areas we're investigating? Have these been agreed and announced, these three?
Yeah, they've been agreed and announced.
Councillor Wilson, so the understanding is if you're a business that's already established in the East Midlands and they decide to move, I don't know, from Nottinghamshire, one of these sites, then it doesn't really help the region as such, because all you've can they relocate from one location into this to get all the, it doesn't help the region?
They can, but there is displacement activity as well, and we would look to not encourage or incentivise them through the tax site policy. And the other thing I would say is that the tax benefits from that point of view to promote upheaval of the business and move it to a different area for the sake of the tax benefits would probably not be beneficial to that company. We would allow growth companies where they're showing clear signs of growth and there is a reason for the expansion, but in terms of just picking up 20 people in a business here and moving on to Infinity Park from Nottingham, for instance, is not what we're looking to encourage, and we're looking to disincentivise them.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really positive to see the importance that's being put to development. And I think that will be a key part of these projects as we go forward. The question really for me is to ensure that people, particularly young people from all of our communities, can access these jobs. Quite often in advanced manufacturing, the jobs will be degree level, and some of our communities there's a much lower proportion of people going to university, so there's a barrier there. Just looking at the need figures, those not in education, employment and training, and it's 13.6% of 16. So it's a lot higher than it has been. So that's something that we really we really need to, I guess the question I has about is how are we going to make sure that these sort of degree level jobs that are potentially going to be created out of the investment zones, how are they accessible to people from all?
So Tom, I'll take Councillor Matthews, but then you can come back and say.
Yeah, first of all, you know, Councillor Ely, they're very good points, and you know they're good. Are we doing any marketing already only for these new zones?
Not as of yet, but it will be sort of moving into the next phase of activity. We've taken them to UK Reef, which was the Investment and Infrastructure Conference up in Leeds earlier this year, as they were presented to the market from that point of view, but next steps will be absolutely marketing them internationally.
And on a final point, on these zones, are we attracting any industry in there? Because I'm sure Councillor Clark won't mind me saying this, at Fareham, the development there was all going to be high-level, high-paid jobs, no tin roofs, and it seemed to be, we don't really want to copy that exercise.
Our intention absolutely is to make sure that we are looking at advanced manufacturing, hence trying to build clusters around them to generate new connectivity at Infinity Park, and potentially look to build up industrial zones around sort of companies like Rolls-Royce, bring that forward with the landowners and developers to try and encourage them as much as we can to not sell these.
I know it's difficult to set a project, and you know what comes along you have to accept.
Yeah.
And then Councillor Wilson point about skill local.
Yes, so early engagement is really key to part of the skills activity and making sure that that's there, and then engage right the way through school levels into further education and encouraging people to try and take up and upskill themselves through the qualification levels. For these, it's a challenge that we know, for instance, again, going back to the Rolls-Royce position, actually a lot of people come in from a long way to sort of work for companies, working through it with our skills colleagues, and I'm sure the Skills and Employment Committee will be keen to engage in and how we encourage it moving forward. It's something we're really cognizant of, and when you take the Hartington Staveley development, for instance, high levels of unemployment and deprivation right next door to that, so if we can look to change that through the youth programme and bring employment right to people's doorsteps, we can help them to get good level jobs.
Okay, we've just got Councillor Emas Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Last week I had the pleasure of attending the launch of the Gene Horse Centre for Advanced Engineering, which is a partnership with West North, where they take all students and are doing all the advanced engineering, the CNC machine, all that sort of thing. It's the first in the UK, and it's something we ought to be looking at and see if we can build with other partnerships like that, because it's a fantastic place, and it's something that we ought to be very proud of in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. So it's those sorts of initiatives with education, working with education and companies that we ought to be trying to develop.
I apologise if I've missed it in the documents. I just wanted to get a time frame in my mind for when these three zones will be open for business, as it were.
So Infinity Park as soon as possible, plots and the infrastructure's there for things to move along. There is a proportion of the Hartington Staveley site which is again has plots available and can move forward. There's a bit later on in terms of some remediation work that needs to take place there, and then the same with Export Park near Worksop, ready to go.
So you're actually saying we could start promoting this right now?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because I've got businesses in my mind already.
Great.
Have a conversation with the officers.
Yeah.
Let's get out your brain.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate members of the constituent authorities of EMCCA being all represented on the development board?
Yes, it's something that we're looking to. There's probably going to have to be some form of governance review, and then do you want to pick up with regards to the National Industrial Strategy, or do you want me to?
Well, it's probably you're referring to the potential for a closer operational alignment between the work that we do on the investment extends beyond most of the boundary of the Freeport is within the EMCCA boundary. So there has been a gradual shift in the position of ministers across the local government department and the business department to try to nest Freeports under mayoral oversight and accountability where Freeports exist, where there are mayors, and ultimately mayors everywhere. So we'll get to that point eventually, I presume. So obviously we have and are currently engaged with, and Richard and Jodie and others are too, in discussions with Freeport colleagues about how we can better align around the accountability arrangements of the Freeport and the combined authority. So that was happening anyway, where the transfer of the account from Leicestershire to combined authority by, I think, spring next year or something like that. So that was a sort of government edict anyway. I think most recently the position is that Freeports and investment zones should effectively be under one umbrella. Now, and they are complementary policies. They both are involved in trying to leverage investment in particular sites. There are incentives around it to make that happen. So one of the other things we need to talk with the Freeport colleagues about is about how we might do some of that operational alignment, which might look like some sort of joint arrangements around delivery or other such things. But we have to think about that. Well, we will have more of a think about that and come back with some options, because obviously the committee will be interested in what the operational arrangements are as well as the sort of policy.
Okay, just before I bring Councillor Clark in, so can we take that as an action then? How we make sure that constituent members are involved in each one of these?
Thank you. I've just realised, Damien mentioned the Freeport, that better late than never. I've just realised I'm a director of Freeport Board. So apologies for that. As I say, better late than never. While I respond to Councillor Matthews, I think he's confusing Fareham with the airport site. My comments related to the airport site, where it's high-tech, highly skilled, not Fareham. Sorry.
Correct that. Okay, any other comments? No? There's 3 recommendations to approve them. There's 2 for endorsement and for noting.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, this is where the agenda goes a bit. Instead of agenda item 8, we're going to agenda item 9, which is UK Shared Prosperity and Rural England Prosperity Fund. Damien Dacey, strategy and inclusive growth, is to provide us an update.
Yeah, thank you. So this is for the investment committee to do a little bit of a mini deep dive into one element of the investment portfolio, which is a UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and there is a more modest rural economic prosperity fund, which is broadly similar, but has a slightly different policy intent around. They're managed together, which is why we brigaded them together. So for the investment programme for this year, it tops up to about £30 million, chunk of investment into the economy. The board, towards the end of last this year, made a series of policy decisions about how UK SBF was to be managed. The curious situation that we are in this is that we are effectively delivering it regionally, but for a single year. So if UK SBF was to continue, one would presume we would continue to have a regional pot that could then be, decisions could be made about how to allocate it. And I'll get on to here in a moment, but hitherto, as colleagues will know, and as some have already mentioned, UK SBF was actually, was managed as if it didn't exist, because for large parts of it, which meant the 2 cities in the region got an individual pot, and then the district and boroughs each got an allocation. Financial year, so from April 25 through to the end of March 2026, instead of those 17 different allocations, the department EMCCA to effectively lead on, to lead on UK SBF delivery. So the decisions that the board have been implemented, a few things I would update on. So the first thing to say is, with thanks actually from colleagues in the City of Nottingham and their UK SBF team, helped us do the initial forecasting of all the outputs and the outcomes that we expect to get. So we've got all of that logged and for the department, so you know, X number of jobs created, X number of commercial floor space expanded, certain number of contact with businesses, shop fronts improved, etc., etc. So all of that is has been set out in total across the region. There's over 2 projects that are funded by SBF funding. That includes a small number, but at the higher end in terms of the value, projects which particularly support, where the board took the decision to move towards a more region-wide model, so not lots of individual local projects, if you see what I mean. Still work, but commissioned more centrally. There is a small number of projects which actually have been done on sort of sub-regional basis practice, but on a similar approach. So they've all been let, and they are now into delivery, which is really positive. The second thing, CLG, for reasons I can't quite explain, despite having all those initial forecasts logged on time, have been relatively slow in getting money out. Has now been received, so our sort of £25 million grant was received last week. In a small number of cases, we has forward funded some of the projects, but no one ready to do that. I'm pretty sure that all of the grant funding agreements between the combined authority and the cities are now in place, and where they are in place, we can now pass that funding on. Where they aren't, we're following up. I'm pretty sure that most of them are probably in place now, grant funding agreements, yeah. Which is good, so that means that that project can get out into the community and onto high streets and other such things. Projects can be progressed. Then the only other thing I would say is that we are required, and of course we would anyway, at the 6th month point to do an outcome. So what's the impact that these projects are going to be supporting within the region? So largely speaking, positive. A bit slow getting the money out the door from government, but now we've got it, so all of those projects can now be funded and supported within the region, and we will do what they are going to be planning on delivering by the year end. So that's where we are on this year. Since we are talking about UKSBF in the time we were writing this paper, the government spending review is concluded, and the spending review confirms that UKSBF funding would not be continued after this year, and it also is not going to be replaced, which is sometimes of course what happens, something slightly rebranded or with a slightly different policy intent. So UKSBF funding is ceasing after this year. The board had already taken a position that any projects funded from managed on the basis they would end on the 31st of March, and there will be no rollover or extended funding off the back of it. So effectively it confirms that anyway, but now we do know that it's for government to continue any current UKSBF funded projects, and so just the committee's help within your local authorities and others just to re-emphasise and confirm that is the case. I think would be helpful, not least because it puts particular focus on ensuring that that funding is spent, because I very much doubt the department will allow us to, even for 3 months, we'll have to return any funding that isn't spent effectively. So on UKSBF, there is, and it's something that obviously we can come back to the committee on, it does actually therefore beg some real questions about how we fund these kinds of activities from April 2026. Note that there's quite a heavy amount of that revenue, that sort of operating funding that funds services and those kinds of things in UKSBF, which will not be there on current plans from next year. So there is some real questions which we all need to think about, and officers will be too, colleagues, about what our priorities are for funding economic development activities in the next year. But that's the current situation that exists today.
Okay, thank you for that, Damien. When you just talked about the risk around the money has to be spent by next year, and we're going to have to do a review. But the worst thing for EMCCA would be if we have to give government money back when there's such a need here. How will we, at some point, when you realise that some projects won't be able to deliver, it's a difficult thing, isn't it, taking money off people and then having enough somewhere else for it to be spent? How will we manage that process?
So we will have a good sense about the likely spending year at the 6 month point. So the 6 month point, which would be in sort of October time, we will have to anyway do a new forecast of outputs, and we will use that to get a sense of any projected underspend. I mean, I'd be quite surprised if, say, Bolsover on there, I mean, I'm just picking a place, but in any case, but we are sort of relying really on places having robust plans in place, recognising that the funding actually hasn't come in till the beginning of Q2 because of the pace of government distribution.
Sort of honesty and some support from, local authorities in the region, because there's no point holding on to it knowing you can't spend it because there is no rollover, because historically you see a lot of places hold on and think there will be a rollover. This is very clear, there is no rollover spending. Councillor Clark?
Thank you. Yeah, it's so disappointing that the SPF is not going to continue beyond this year. It really is for communities. Damien mentioned high street, shop fronts, and where those improvements have taken place. In the grand scheme of things, for not a lot of money, in some cases a few hundred or a few £1,000, it really lifts the high street and really encourages people continue using the high street rather than sticking at home and just going on online. And as I said, to the local economy, certainly anecdotally in Rushcliffe area, people have made comments of how shop fronts do get improved. So it really is incredibly disappointing. So whether we can at some stage waive some form and try and get some replacement or of some sort to try and continue supporting the small local, I'd be absolutely in favour of that.
Yeah, it might be worth looking at what difference it has made, how much has been, what difference it's made, so we can look at, obviously, if we were to fund it as EMCCA, for example, what benefits it would bring, because it might have a kind of somewhere really well and in other places not. So some sort of evaluation would be kind of good for us as our region to understand that. Any other questions? Okay. There's 2 recommendations within this. We've had the update. One is to note the current national position on UK SPF. Okay, everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Yep, thank you very much. Item 10, the investment pipeline and portfolio. Tom, this is for you.
So this was just a quick paper, again, in terms of the briefing of members to let them know what the volume is at this point in time. It outlines the kinds of things that we have as a committee to see over around this year's indicative budget and allocation for the 25-26 financial year, but then also that continue right the way up to 29-30, the amounts of funding that we have to spend on them. So it's a capital breakdown and revenue breakdown from that point of view. It also gives some brief feedback with regards to programmes along since we last met, with regards to like the Brownfield Housing Fund and the projects that are coming forward off the back of that. Investment fund projects which were approved by the main board in March of last financial year. And yeah, it was just for the members to be able to see the oversight really in terms of what we have available for us to utilise.
Okay, Damien?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, I mean, committee's feedback on an ongoing basis is welcome in terms of what the most useful product, keeping an overview of all the various bits of investment. There is a lot, not least because, I mean, the classic thing is, the reason that some parts of the country are funded by more consolidated funding settlements is because they have like 100+ different funding streams. But I think we're probably close to 40 odd at the moment. So this more narrative-based update is one way to do it. The committee may sort of scorecard or more tabular-based thing going forward. We're really happy to take feedback on that and likewise flag things for a deep dive. Or, it's a constantly rolling programme with everything at slightly different stages of development, of course. So I was just going to say that just in terms of progresses, there is a lot in the skills and employment space, particularly around investment and grant funding, where there is a lot done by the Skills and Employment Committee to give some oversight to that. But it is positive to report, despite some wrinkles in the system, that the first devolved adult skills will be executed, and learners in the region will be undertaking placements and courses off the basis of that funding for the next academic year, which is in August, September. So that's positive, just one that's picked up because it's quite a significant investment into the region per year.
This is probably one of the key functions of the investment committee, is about getting the assurance, the management and the oversight of these funds. I think for the first financial year it's good to have it, but I think we're going to have to go into, break them down by project. What were they meant to actually achieve? Where are they in a rag rate? To understand, are they on track, or are they, what bits of the project is falling behind? A paragraph on each or something like that, and then if we want to deep dive further, then we can have an actual paper on these in more details.
Yeah.
I think, just from my understanding, you know how like the D2 entry is coming to an end, the lab stuff over here, is that some part of one of these projects? It didn't make it clear which ones were.
Yeah, so in Annex A, they are mainly historic capital investment, which is former left capital projects.
Oh, okay.
For example, we can also check and ensure that the wider set investment fund and stuff like that. I mean, to some extent, we've just integrated it into the portfolio rather than keeping it as a separate point.
But if we, because they're the ones that
Yes.
I'd like to just get an understanding which projects they were within that, so it's transparent, and,
Yeah.
and we're able to kind of just manage that, because I get swallowed into that stuff because of being concerned with them previously and making sure that they actually deliver and stuff. I think that's important. Anybody else got any questions?
Well, just one more observation, apologies. So I think the next time we will make sure we do a proper QA again of the appendices. So I think as time goes on, once budgets becomes clearer. So in not all cases we don't, but we do have, for example, indicative budgets for the 2 billion transforming, it's called Transport the City Regions on here, where the capital element is 55 million this year, but actually indicative amounts in future years, where in year 4 or 5, it's like 400 million a year or something being spent in the region through the CA. So on that line alone, so it also gives the committee a sense of the scaling up that we're going to have to do.
But if somebody was interested, just to understand what brownfield sites, what we're trying to do, that kind of numbers and stuff, rather than overall of sites would be helpful. But we're happy to work that for the next committee. Happy to note that. Yeah, thank you very much. Now, okay, we're going back to agenda item 8, Midlands Mindful, please.
Okay, Tom's also been working on this, so Tom, if there's anything you want to add, please do. So the Midland Mind Forge is it's a piece of activity which is happening within the region that is intended to by the universities that set it up to have positive economic impact within the EMCCA region, not just the whole of the Midlands. But it is also something which officers, again, obviously in consultation with the officer group that support this committee, so whenever we say officers, which mean EMCCA, constituents and wider, are also looking at with respect to a potential investment proposition. So this is a sort of an early conversation with the committee, just to get a bit of a sounding and just inform a little bit about what it is, so that we can then come back later once the due diligence that we're currently engaged with is completed, if that makes sense. So this is sort of, as it were, subject to the views of the committee and board. It could be, but there's still work to be done. So Midlands Mind Forge, it's effectively an investment vehicle, and it's been set up, co-funded by 8 Midlands universities, Cranfield, Keele, Leicester, Loughborough, Nottingham and Warwick. So they have come together, and they do work with wider universities in the Midlands, but those are the sort of 8, if you like, and the purpose of it is about fundamentally translating university-led research into scalable businesses. I think that happens. So a bit of innovation, research around it, often perhaps with a bit of public funding. There is then a commercialisation option. Businesses can then grow off the back of them, local businesses creating local jobs. The overall aim, if we look down the line, Forge is to raise up to £250 million to invest in these sorts of innovation-led businesses. Funding would be raised from corporate partners, institutional investors, and sort of it being more patient capital orientated, and indeed, you know, things like this. Okay, so that's the sort of basic proposition. It does have a bit of an investment focus. I've met some of these businesses. They in sectors which are aligned to our emerging local growth plan priorities, so clean technologies, AI, computational science, life sciences, those kinds of things. So why is this necessary anyway? Why is it necessary to have universities coming together in an investment vehicle? And the big reason is the funding gap that exists within this region. It is relatively well known that in-out companies in the Midlands are significantly less likely to attract and secure venture capital investment than similar organisers in other parts of the country, particularly the so-called Golden Triangle around London, Cambridge and Oxford. Some people, including Mindforge, have this figure which is on average, there's effective funding, and I think many could argue that if you met some of these businesses, they're not 6 or 7 times less innovative. So there is a funding gap, which is, it's a complex problem, there's lots of reasons for it, it's not only the Midlands that suffer. So Mindforge is specifically designed to address this disparity by attracting public and private investment and to bridge that, effectively prove the concept and try to create some of those virtuous circles that then lead to more venture capital wanting to come into the region because there is investment. That's effectively the role of it. I'll finish with this, which is if we were to, so currently Mindforge is going pilot raise where it's looking to raise about £8 million of investment, so that'd be capital investment. There is public funding through one of the research councils, which is largely committed. There is a private funder who is involved with them, and we are in competition. And also there is another combined authority in the Midlands who are also pretty far advanced in terms of their due diligence, just like we are in considering partaking in this pilot raise. So we are currently, with the support officers around the table, involved in due diligence around this from a governance, from a legal, from a financial, actually from a sort of priorities point of view. We're looking at some of the culture investing and prospects and other such things. But that's the sort of basic proposition, I guess. That's where we're at in terms of Midlands Mindforge. So it was really a bit of a chance just to update the committee on this. I guess also just to really take any questions we could presentation in a future meeting, and I will pause for probably quite a lot of information.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Councillor Emas Williams.
Yeah, just a question at 4.1 regarding the due diligence. Difficulties, the statement at the end says the report does not cover financial or taxation affairs.
Let me just look at which bit of the report.
4.1.
Yeah, go on, Richard.
Yeah, so just to answer that, we will be undertaking some further financial due diligence and any taxation implications. The brief of Gowling's was largely
Right.
so there's more to do.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Woodings.
I mean, I think this sounds. I think it's something that we should carry on looking into as far as the finance side of it, and it does feel as though it has a huge potential. And I think it's quite interesting, Councillor Reeny's comments earlier about the gap between patents and actually linking, inventors and actually linking them to the funding to be able to get their ideas off the ground. Well, this for me it seems exactly the sort of vehicle that you might want to think about funding in order to exactly bridge that gap. So I think it sounds really interesting, and I think it's worthwhile for actually exploring further. it's the right sort of vehicle to encourage this, because I know that there's a huge amount of innovation that takes place at the University of Nottingham. Students coming in there, they come up with some incredible ideas, but if we're missing out on that funding gap to help the start-up phase, then this could really help as far as developing those into monetisable.
Yep, Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, going back to Councillor Woodings and Councillor Rooney about universities really and IPs. My daughter just come back from America, 4 years in Florida, and the investment in universities over there, you know, from philanthropists to tax breaks, you know, Loughborough and Nottingham are fabulous universities, high level, miles behind America, and we need to somehow invest money, as Councillor Rooney says, on these wonderful, of any age, because some are older who go into there, and I think that's a real big thing we should have a go at to improve on this board, this committee.
Yeah, quite keen for us to be involved. Although a couple of items in the report sort of set me scratching my head. It starts at 1.3 saying, says that information can't be shared, apparently even with us, because I don't recall us signing a non-disclosure agreement, but or I certainly haven't. But it says that set up a business that's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So if it's a regulated business, why can't we have the basic regulated information, or the advisor telling us what this name out? Most of this information would be in the public domain anyway. We're told that this business is doing an initial fundraiser, so that information's available, but it's not, and so it leaves you scratching your head a little bit, because if we had that information, we'd have a lot more idea about what we're precisely focused on. Picking up on the earlier comment, which Councillor Matthews talked, Williams talked about due diligence. If it's a regulated company that's set up, then to actually get registered with the Financial Conduct Authority, quite a lot of due diligence will take these people these days. And this doesn't actually say whether they've passed the due diligence or not on a simple basis. Due diligence has been carried out. We're actually being taught here. There's no basic details about when we get his money back or what return we might get or anything like that, just the basic details. And then to do due diligence that does not cover financial or taxation affairs, actually is peculiar in a financial product, ultimately. So, although I'm very, very keen to be involved in this, because I believe offshoot from universities particularly is a really exciting area. And the numbers in this report saying that it aims to raise 700 million over 10 years is quite, I don't understand what we will be buying into, or even the legal structure. Is it a unit trust? Is it an investment trust? Is it an open-ended investment company? Why is it not set up as a rolling series of venture capital trusts? So it, as it is, triggered more questions than answers for me, really. But yes, I'm keen for us to follow up, but I'd like a lot more material. As it stands, I certainly couldn't vote for this, because the information still lacks, too little.
So, okay, thank you for that. So I think if we look at the resolution, it's saying, should we propose to request officers to conduct further due diligence into the fund. So before we agree to it, we have to come back to the committee with all the details, because we had a meeting before this meeting, the pre-meeting, to discuss should this paper come forward, to move it down the agenda, because it would make more sense otherwise. We're talking about something where you potentially could invest 2 million, but we can't make that decision. They might not pass due diligence, and then do we want to go into that whole farce where we named a company and whether we're going for it? I think that was the idea. So the idea is if committee agree that we ask officers to continue with the due diligence, potentially at the next committee with more details and all the kind of details, Councillor Reedy, that you've just raised here. But I think if we look at what is presented at the moment, it's saying there's 8 universities involved. They're the sole shareholder, capital investment of 2.8 million, they need 8 million, But if EMCCA were to go and then pass a due diligence, we put 2 million forward, that would leave them 3 million behind, and then if there's another combined authority potentially looking at investing in that, then obviously it looks prosperous. And do we want to kind of miss a boat of an opportunity where I think at the moment we're too short-sighted to say actually there's not enough there, we're not doing nothing with it. I think it's sensible to say let's go carry on the due diligence, it don't really cost you much, with a full paper to say actually we invest in them.
I completely agree that we should continue and get, but the point is, this paper says already registered with the Financial Services Authority and already raising money. So a lot of that information's there that we could have had now.
I've got bring Councillor Wilson in and I'll bring you in.
Yeah, it was just to agree really with a lot of what's already been said. It's a very interesting prospect. I think we need more just to receive a presentation at a future meeting with some greater detail and answer some of these questions that we've raised today. But definitely worth looking into. I think.
That in the 14 months on since EMCCA was established, we can talk about EMCCA investing 2 million. If if the mayor didn't actually exist, none of us would have had that kind of money to invest in any of it. So it just shows how we can work with other combined authorities to get the bigger picture and a bigger investment, and hopefully, because these local universities, especially the University of Nottingham, we can keep that talent here. It'd be fantastic. But Damien, anything you want to add?
That's very clear. We obviously continuing to look into the proposition, and I think some of the points, quite rightly, that Councillor Rini and others have made about the detail of the arrangements are really helpful, and if you did them right, and just an apology, I guess, if the paper implies that there's all this sort of information over here that we're not sort of sharing with the committee, that's not the intent. There is, though, fair to say we haven't actually had to sort of run up against it yet. Middle of the mind fortune. Loads of information on the website around it and such things, so and we've drawn on some of that for this material. We'll take that away, and maybe the prospect of hearing from them directly, and it's Dr. Lisa Smith who runs it, who was really happy to come today, but we just thought it was best to do and have it. So maybe we can do something online, sort of a standalone briefing, and offer that to the committee in advance of any further decisions, which might help.
That sounds sensible. Councillor Matthews?
Yeah, I think this is really exciting. You can see that, some of the things get changed in time. But I think this is really exciting for the whole region, that, we can all benefit out of this, and the money that they're bringing to us, I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to put a stamp on something and say, we develop this going forward.
So, is the committee happy for officers to request officers to conduct further due diligence into the fund?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, agenda item 11 is the investment committee work programme. Tom?
Yeah, again, just a short one in terms of briefing on the work programme. Main proposals and items of business for us to look at moving forward with a review of recommendations in terms of applicable take forward, oversight of the investment portfolio in general and the risk management of that, which we picked up on the investment portfolio pipeline investment pipeline, and then investments and decision making there probably will be moving into the business case decisions and before the time of drafting the paper will just be clarified. So we'll be moving on to the fourth.
The recommendations are to note the proposed work programme, note the updated investment committee in terms of reference, attach that appendix B. But anybody got a question?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify 2.1, whether that was an exhaustive list or if the wording it can be a living document and added to. The name of the committee is investment. The clues in the name, I interpret that in the future. And so what I'm having in mind is, can we maybe look at the potential very successful universities, but I'm talking about perhaps more about skills and apprenticeships, and whether we could look at the promotion and monitoring of apprenticeships around the region in addition to universities.
I mean, I would suggest that that's the role of the Employment and Skills Committee, and then that overarching view of how those themes link together then comes back through the board.
So long as it, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the way the structured system works is each of those portfolio committees develop investment proposals in order to deliver strategic objectives. The committee has a role, as set out, to make sure that oversight is there across all of the piece. So review of that is key. If you feel that that is missing, then pick up.
What we don't want to do is duplicate stuff.
Absolutely,
Just create extra work and nobody knows what's happening then. Anybody else? Close business of the investment committee. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
I'm away